Is cannabis or marijuana allowable biblically? Peace to you all. This is the follow-up to our previous video, Is Smoking Allowable Biblically? Satan is the father of a lie, and he and his demons have been very diligent in spreading lies and hiding history. The spiritual and biological accounts of smoking, eating, and drinking marijuana are some of those hidden histories that has been very well hidden and buried. There are two distinct types of cannabis plants. These two types of cannabis plants are not defined scientifically. They are defined biblically. This can be understood and directly shown in the example of the biblically clean meat that is fit for eating called beef. Leviticus 11:3 states, "Whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts, ye shall eat." That would certainly be beef. Although a beef steak is clean and fit for eating, there are stipulations. That clean meat would not be biblically clean if the steak is prepared in a biblically unlawful manner. For example, if the steak is undercooked, leaving the blood in it, cooked rare, it is unclean and unfit for eating. Also, if the steak is eaten and its fat is eaten too, it is also biblically unclean and unfit for eating. Leviticus 3:17 states, "It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood." So we see that perfectly clean food and meat can be made unclean through the improper manner of preparation. The same is true for the cannabis plant. There are perfectly clean cannabis plants, biblically fit for eating and drinking. And there are also completely unclean cannabis plants, biblically unfit for smoking, eating, or drinking. There are two distinct types of cannabis, clean cannabis and unclean cannabis. Before we discuss the clean cannabis, let's first discuss the unclean type of cannabis. Unclean cannabis is not biblically allowed because of the repeated perverted manner in which the cannabis is grown or cultivated. This perverted manner of cultivation transforms the cannabis into an unclean plant, physically not meeting the requirements of biblical law. The perversion that occurs in this cannabis is celebrated, much like the fatty, bloody red, medium rare made unclean meat that is celebrated in modern culture. The perverted growing practices of this cannabis renders it unclean. It breaks biblical law and therefore is not allowable biblically. This discussion of unclean and clean cannabis has been divided into 4 parts. The first part is growing practices and cultivation of unclean cannabis. The second part, history and divination use of unclean cannabis. The third part, modern day unclean cannabis and New Age philosophies. And the fourth part, clean cannabis is accessible and grows in many parts of the U.S. and the world. Growing practices and cultivation of unclean cannabis. The unnatural cultivation of cannabis is sorcery and has produced a Frankenstein-like product. It is mind-altering in a way that allows for a connection between the human world and the demonic world. This cultivation follows the satanic pattern of male child sacrifice while exploiting the female. The marijuana cultivation industry is able to follow this satanic pattern of kill and exploit because of the plant's unique characteristics. 95% of all plants on the earth have male and female flowers on the same plant. This allows for most all plants to reproduce by using only one plant. Those plants are called monoecious. The cannabis plant is totally different. This plant functions like humans. It requires 2 separate plants to reproduce, a male cannabis plant and a female cannabis plant. The cannabis is called dioecious. The flowers on the male plant produce pollen, which are likened to human male sperm. The flowers on the female plant contain the ovary, which, like a woman's womb, collects the pollen or sperm from the male plant in order to become fertilized. This fertilization then produces the seed and thereby a brand new plant, which would either be male or female, just like in human reproduction.
Going to learn to distinguish between monoecious and dioecious plants. Monoecious plants contain both male and female organs in the same plant. It may be the case that the male and female reproductive organs are found on the same flower or on different flowers on the same plant. For example, let's take a look at painted mountain corn. The corn silks are an elongated stigma that receive pollen from the tassel that is found at the top of the corn plant. Dioecious plants contain male and female organs on separate plants. In dioecious plants, you need both a male and female plant to produce fruit and seeds.
The marijuana cultivation industry, however, through means of manipulation, has altered the natural design. The industry has been consistently killing the male plant and forcing the female plant into an exploited, diseased state. This idea of killing the male seed exists not just in the plant world, but it is a mini mirror showing what has happened to a certain seed of mankind. This plan goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, back to when Satan learned of his punishment for his wickedness. He was told of the prophecy of his defeat at the hand of the Messiah, Yeshua. Genesis 3:14 states, "And Yah said unto the serpent, Because you have done this, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and you shall bruise his heel." This system of eliminating the male child before he grows was first committed on a national scale during the Egyptian captivity. Fueled by Satan, the destruction of the Hebrew boys was commissioned by the Egyptian Pharaoh to weaken the Hebrews as a nation, but also, according to Jasher, a book of Hebrew legend, to specifically destroy Moses, who was destined to lead the Hebrews to freedom and initiate Egypt's downfall. Jasher states, chapter 67, verses 19 through 20, "For a son will be born to Israel who will destroy all Egypt and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel before this evil arise against Egypt." The actual biblical scriptures also made Pharaoh's intentions very clear: to kill the male child before he grows, but to allow the female child to survive without her counterpart. Exodus chapter 1 and verse 16. "And he said, When you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live." Because the midwives refused to kill any of the Hebrew newborn children, the Pharaoh commanded that all of the Egyptians be responsible for killing the Hebrew newborn males. Exodus 1 and 22 states, "And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born you shall cast in the river, and every daughter you shall save alive." The marijuana cultivation industry is powered by the same wicked spirit of eliminating the male seed before it grows. The second Satan-fueled mass killing of newly born Hebrew males occurred during the Roman occupation of Jerusalem, with again the purpose of killing one single Hebrew male son, prophesied to be the salvation of Israel. Matthew 1 and 21 states, "And she shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Yeshua, for he shall save his people from their sins." King Herod, like Pharaoh, feared that single male child that would lead the Hebrews. Herod, upon hearing of the birth of the Messiah Yeshua, sought to kill him. Like Pharaoh, Herod commanded a mass killing of the Hebrew male children. Matthew 2 and 16 states, Then Herod sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under. The book of Revelation also speaks of Satan's attempt to kill the Messiah, Yeshua, through the reign of King Herod. Here, Satan is referred to as the dragon. Revelation 12:4 states, "The dragon, Satan, stood before the woman, the nation of Israel, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, Yeshua, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron." Now let's get a better understanding as to why and how the marijuana cultivation industry follows the ways of Pharaoh, King Herod, and the dragon Satan. In a natural setting, the pollen or sperm of the male plant of the cannabis is released in the wind and spreads vigorously to the female plants, thereby easily impregnating or fertilizing any female plants growing in the area, which then produce seeds to create new plants. Cannabis, however, is generally grown for the desired mind-altering effects that come from the cannabinoid compound called THC. With the cannabis plant, only the female plant produces the buds that contain large amounts of THC for mind alteration. The male cannabis plant does not produce any buds, and its leaves have almost no THC. The male cannabis plant does not cause mind alteration. It is only the female plant that can cause the mind alteration. However, once a female plant has been impregnated or fertilized, the THC in that female plant drastically drops. Once the female plant is fertilized, the THC is converted into the medicinal cannabinoid compound called CBD, and the female plant sends its energy to promote the growth of that seed. The cannabis cultivation process systematically kills the male seed, breaking Yah's law by stopping the herb from yielding seed. Genesis chapter 1:11-12. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth herb yielding seed." And the earth brought forth herb yielding seed after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. An unfertilized female cannabis plant seeks desperately to become fertilized and produce seeds, which is according to Yah's law. Because of this, the female cannabis plant instinctively is physically altered to better attract the male cannabis pollen. The instinctive physical alterations that take place in the unfertilized female plant are as follows. 1. The increasing size of her buds. 2. The great increase in THC levels. 3. The increase in CBD levels. 4. The production of more potent sticky resin to catch the male pollen. 5. The length of time of her bud production is extended. 6. The size of the female cannabis plant's flower buds will increase. And 7. The THC actual intensity will increase in order to promote the chances of becoming fertilized in order to produce seeds. These adaptations make the female plant easier for the male plant's pollen to find the female flower and her ovaries. These changes occur naturally so that the plant can succeed in keeping the Most High Yah's law in nature. The marijuana industry exploits these instinctive attributes. The more seasons and years that a female cannabis plant is left unfertilized, the higher the THC levels will continue to increase and become more potent. This is why many people in the cannabis industry refer to certain cannabis plant lines as strains. Historically, these potent strains are products of many, many seasons of the female plants being forced to remain unfertilized. These potent strains are even additionally manipulated to create even more intensely potent strains that further corrupt the body vessel, as we will see. The mind-altering potency of these unfertilized female plants is a side effect of breaking Yah's law. Both the diviners and idolaters of ancient times and the New Agers and industrial cannabis cultivators of today have consistently killed the male plant and isolated the female cannabis plants in order to exploit and extract this very potent THC, as well as the CBD from the distressed, unfertilized female plant. Historically, just a few male plants were saved to maintain future production, but modern science has even changed this. With great perversion, scientists today have created ways to feminize cannabis seeds so that when new plants are produced, only female plants will occur. Proverbs 28:6 states, "Better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse in his ways, though he be rich." This process involves forcing female plants through the use of chemicals to perform as if they were male plants. This type of plant sex change process even goes as far as to cause the altered female plants to produce pollen, i.e. sperm. Sounds like advanced plant transgendering, doesn't it? Their sorcery has gone a step further. Once the female plants are forced to make pollen, this adulterated female pollen sperm is then collected and transferred to a separate female plant for fertilization. This ultimately results into feminized marijuana seeds that will only grow into female plants, never male plants. This process totally eliminates the male plants from this process. This process is abominable. This process is totally against Yah's law, resulting in mingled seeds. Leviticus 19:19 states, "Ye shall keep my statutes. You shall not sow thy field with mingled seed." Genesis chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth the herb yielding seed." And the earth brought forth herb yielding seed after his kind. And Elohim saw it was good. The scripture states that the herb should yield seed after his kind. Feminized seeds produced only seeds after her kind, producing in only female plants. This is completely against Yah's design. The herb that bears seed according to its kind and according to its likeness, according to law, would have to be able to produce both male and female plants, which feminized seeds cannot do. Just as in human reproduction, it is the male that determines the sex of the offspring. Both the marijuana industry and the industrial hemp industry are guilty of these perversions. The resulting scientific fruit, the feminized seeds, are perverted and not good fruit. John the Baptist spoke about trees that produce fruit that is not good. Matthew 3:10 states, "And now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Therefore every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire."
Destination perversion. Definition of perversion is the abnormal use of a thing. That means that anything you use anything you use abnormally or not the way it was intended, you are going to pervert that thing. Meaning you would take something that was created perfect if you use it properly and pervert it into a different thing. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Satan is the author of perversion. He does not create. He takes what was created and perverts it and makes it his own thing. There was a brother that was in the church, and he said, "Well, see, weed don't hurt nobody. It grows wild. Bible says, you know, the trees and the herbs of the nations is for the heal. The trees are for the healing of the nation. So this is natural. So it has medicinal properties. So what's wrong with it? No greater argue than a weed smoker. They argue with you. Lips black, fingers black, still be arguing. Lung black, still be arguing. Don't use God because he created a plant that man perverted.
The second section is history and divination use of unclean cannabis. We've been discussing the physical aspects of cultivated cannabis. Now let's discuss its spiritual and historical use. The use of this unclean cannabis can be traced back to antiquity. Throughout history, unclean cannabis, death rituals, and necromancy are strongly intertwined. Historic cannabis can be seen in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. The pagan Egyptian goddess Seshat was considered essential for burial rituals and for spell-casting communications with the newly dead. Seshat was depicted in many hieroglyphs. She was shown with the cannabis leaf above her head. The cannabis stem connected to her head was said to symbolize the link between cannabis and knowledge, allowing for the communication with the dead. Her leaf was always enclosed within a tent over her head, seemingly to concentrate the cannabis incense and smoke for greater spiritual connection.
Seshet. Her headdress consists of a 7-pointed star, or more aptly described, a 7-petaled flower, which is associated with the cannabis plant. It is written that Seshet opens the door to heaven for you, and this is often translated as a reference to the psychotropic effects of the cannabis plant. Seshet bring writing to a man in the realm of the dead, and these writings were spells that could help the dead person to vanquish terrors of the underworld and to become a more powerful spirit.
Biblical scriptures show us that these demonic rituals took place also amongst idolatrous Hebrew Israelites who chose to follow foreign gods and goddesses. These disobedient Hebrews worshiped two main pagan deities, Baal and his wife Ashtaroth, also known as Asherah, Ashtoreth, and Astarte. Judges 2:13 state, "And they forsook Yah and served Baal and Ashtaroth." Judges 10:6. "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of Yah, and served Baalim and Ashtaroth, and forsook Yah." Even the very first king of ancient Israel sought after foreign gods. King Saul, after repetitively disobeying Yah, delved into necromancy, the communication with the dead. King Saul visited a witch to access evil spirits in order to communicate with the dead prophet Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 28:7 and 8. "Then said Saul unto his servants, Seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit. And Saul disguised himself, came to the woman by night, and he said, Divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up, whom I shall name unto thee." The scriptures show further evidence of the downward spiral of King Saul. King Saul had 4 sons. At the start of his reign, he desired to properly serve Yah, and this was shown through his naming of his eldest son, Jonathan, which means gift from Yah. Later in his reign, however, his disobedience was shown through the naming of his youngest son, Eshbaal, which means man of Baal. He named his youngest son, man of Baal, the abominable pagan deity. 1 Chronicles 8:33. King Saul begat Jonathan and Eshbaal. Historic Israelite worship of these two deities consisted of 2 main rituals, one for the husband deity, Baal, and one for the wife deity, Ashtaroth. The ritual for the wife, Ashtaroth, included the planting of groves, burning incense in the groves, and divination. 1 Kings 11:33 states, "They have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and have not walked in my ways, as did David." 1 Kings 14 and 15 states, "For Yah shall smite Israel because they have made their groves, provoking Yah to anger."
So the Asherah of the Hebrew scriptures worshipped along with Baal. All right. And I think it's mentioned here where our people were reviled for their incense burning practices in the Bible to these deities or false gods. Quoted here, in light of Asherah's recognition as a symbol of the sacred tree and her cult's use of cannabis, also worshipped in ancient Egypt, tributes to this queen of heaven and goddess of healing were widespread across the region, with a dedicated herb burned in her honor. Sim Ashara translate as aromatic of the goddess Ishtar. All right. Sometimes considered mother to Ishtar, consort to gods El and Baal, or wife of, writes Kant. Tributes to Asherah were cult objects of sacred poles or stylized trees erected by Israelites throughout most of their history. Okay. Now, ain't no coincidence that our people refer to weed, marijuana, that is cannabis, as tree or trees. All right. An ancient depiction of an Asherah tree from the palace of Ashurbanipal looks a lot like a cannabis plant with a top cola, says Kant, noting the tree's leaves were inscribed with 7 and 9 points. It's always 7 leaves or it's always 9 leaves. You understand what I'm saying? Israelites were eventually forbidden to pay tribute to Asherah, but many kept erecting sacred poles and or trees in her honor anyway. Therefore, brothers and sisters smoking and or burning weed, that is cannabis or marijuana, you do so, you are partaking in a ritualistic rite venerating the false god Ishtar. You are erecting your Asherah tree or pole. Repent, repent, repent. Tear down your high places. Destroy and get rid of your groves. Stop erecting, stop lifting up Asherah, Baal's wife.
Many people believe that cannabis can only grow to a bush size or plant size, but groves of cannabis trees can grow up to 20 feet tall. The groves in ancient Israel were the locations of witchcraft ceremonies involving burning cannabis, incense for spirit divination, and necromancy. Even today, groves of many types are still marketed to promote magic and witchcraft for children in fairy tales, games, and cartoons. Judges 3 and 7. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yah, and forgot Yah their Elohim, and served Baalim and the groves. 1 Kings 18 and 19. Israel, the prophets of Baal, 450, and the prophets of the groves, 400. The planting of these groves near Yah's altar was strictly forbidden by the Most High God Yah, and the Hebrews were expressly commanded to destroy them and cut them down. Deuteronomy 16 and 21. You shall not plant thee a grove of any trees near unto the altar of Yahweh your Elohim, which you shall make thee. Exodus 34 and 13. But you shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. The second worship ritual for the husband and wife deity team was even more dire than the first. The main ritual to the husband, Baal, was the committing of child sacrifice. 2 Kings 17 and 16. They left all the commandments and they made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove and served Baal. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire and used divination and enchantments. Ezekiel 23 and 37 and 39. And with their idols they committed adultery, and have caused their sons whom they bear unto me to pass for them through the fire to devour them. For when they had slain their children to their idols, then they came the same day into my sanctuary to profane it. This Baal and Ashtoreth worship is a death ritual of child sacrifice intertwined with mind-altering cannabis incense, which promotes communication with the spirits of the newly dead. The pagan deity Baal has been renamed over the ages and worshiped by newer societies. But the ways of worship have remained the same: child sacrifice, unclean cannabis, and necromancy. From the Canaanite deity Baal that the idolatrous Hebrews worshipped, to Baal Hermon, who the Carthaginians worshipped, to Kronos, who the Greeks worshipped, to Saturn, who the Romans worshipped. The people believed that their deity, Baal, Kronos, and Saturn, all required sacrifice. Each of these ancient societies offered child sacrifices to this renamed Baal deity while burning Ashtoreth's unclean cannabis incense. The perverted cannabis incense was burned in order to create the hallucinogenic effects that would allow the diviners and the necromancers to communicate with the spirits of their sacrificed children. The Most High God Yah warned his people not to partake of these abominable practices. Deuteronomy 18:10. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto Yah. Jeremiah 11:13. O Judah, you set up altars to that shameful thing, even altars to burn incense unto Baal. Jeremiah 18:15. They have burned incense to vanity. Jeremiah 19:4. And have filled this place with the blood of innocents, children. Israelite king of Judah, Manasseh, was well known for his dedication to witchcraft, necromancy, and child sacrifice, even his own children. 2 Chronicles 33:1. The king of Judah, Manasseh, reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, but did that which was evil. For he built again the high places which King Hezekiah his father had broken down. And he reared up altars for Baalim and made groves, and he caused his children to pass through the fire. Also he observed times, and used enchantments, and used witchcraft, and dealt with the familiar spirit. And with wizards he wrought much evil. Long after the Israelite king Manasseh's death, this practice continued in Israel, along with the use of tophets. What are tophets? They are special cemeteries for burying the babies and young children that were sacrificed to Baal. These tophets were reused in Roman times, and Romans simply replaced the deity name Baal for Saturn, and the name of Tophet for Columbriara. Jeremiah 7:31-32. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnon, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire. It shall no more be called Tophet, but the valley of slaughter. Later, Romans transformed their sacrifices and substituted adult male slaves instead of the children to be the ones sacrificed to their pagan god in the gladiator arenas.
While we often envision gladiators locked in bloody duels to entertain roaring crowds in the Colosseum, their origins were far more somber. Their first clashes unfolded not in rowdy arenas, but in solemn and sacred spaces, funerals. Emerging in the 3rd century BC, these early gladiator fights served as ritualistic blood offerings to appease the spirits of deceased nobles.
After a violent end, many gladiators were sometimes buried in common graves known as columbaria.
This unclean cannabis, grown in their perverted manner, is truly their potion in the human blood sacrifice and demon communication rituals.
Cannabis in the ancient Greek and Roman world. There's one more way the Greeks and Romans used cannabis: in religion. Tell me about that.
For the Greeks, we have some evidence that they used it in their religion from physical artifacts and material artifacts. And the Greek usage, for instance, of the Scythians, that is that it was used in burial, part of the funeral tradition.
Oh, that is so interesting. And I thought that this was one of the great parts in your book. They were using it to communicate with the dead?
This is exactly right. In other cultures like the Scythians and the ancient Chinese culture, the Gushi, they used cannabis at the time of the burial, and they buried cannabis with the deceased so they can continue talking to that deceased person and the dead. In the ancient Greek world, we have a very famous oracle, place of religious worship, where people came to speak to the dead by using cannabis and sitting with the priestess. This is called the Oracle of Thesprotia. And we have a very long history of it going back to the Greek, almost the Bronze Age of Greece.
Section 3, Modern-Day Unclean Cannabis and the New Age Philosophies. These unclean cannabis sacrificial and necromancy rituals have continued until today. Eastern and New Age religions are currently the leaders in promoting this perverted cannabis and its spirit communication rites.
Being bound by demonic spirits, it is often very much subtle, and you do not know the influence is actually there. In order for demons to get into a person and dwell in their bodies, an opening in the protective hedge must be made. Sin breaks a hole in the protective hedge, many times allowing a demon to actually enter into a person committing the sin. We can call these holes doorways. Every person needs to be aware of possible doorways in his or her own life. That means that you have to close doorways. And may have opened up a doorway, you must close them.
Renamed yet again, the deity Baal has become the Hindu god Shiva. This renamed Baal's wife, previously named Ashtoreth, is now called Parvati or Kali. As before, the renamed Baal or Shiva requires child sacrifice.
Lord Shiva, among the great deities of Hinduism, most personifies the practice of yoga. You will see the picture of him from at a temple. And so he's crushing the male child. The ring a bell male child. People say this is a male child.
Yeah.
And then some of them say it's not a male child, it is a demon of ignorance. And Shiva is the god of knowledge. And so he's crushing the male child. There's a ring a bell male child.
Mm-hmm. Male child. It's like Jesus.
Yeah. And
which is really kind of a reversal of the prophecy in the Garden of Eden that they would bite the heel and the heel would crush his kingdom.
Yes, it's a reverse.
Yeah.
He is a teacher that teaches under the tree of knowledge, and even at his feet there is a male.
And the wife, Kali, provides the hallucinogenic, unclean cannabis potions for divining and necromancy. This Hindu deity Shiva is called the Lord of Bang because of his often ingesting of cannabis. Bang is a Hindu word for cannabis. Most Hindu followers drink cannabis and milk. Drinking and eating unclean cannabis is much more potent and mind-altering and long-lasting than in taking it by smoke.
Fascinating connection between Lord Shiva and cannabis. In Hindu mythology, Lord Shiva is often depicted residing in the lofty peaks of the Himalayas, adorned with a garland of Rudraksh beads and covered in ash from the cremation grounds. But what many people don't know is the significant role that cannabis plays in the worship and rituals surrounding Lord Shiva. Cannabis, known as bhang or ganja in India, has been used for thousands of years in various cultural and religious practices. In the case of Lord Shiva, it's believed that cannabis holds a special place in his worship. Devotees of Shiva often consume cannabis as a form of devotion. Devotees partake in rituals where bhang, a preparation made from cannabis leaves and flowers, is consumed as prasad or an offering to Lord Shiva.
The Baal death cult has been updated in Shiva. Shiva, also called the Destroyer, is often shown crushing his disowned son under his foot. This connects directly back to Baal-style child sacrifice. A statue of Shiva has been placed at CERN, and a demonic death-oriented ritual was enacted on the site on video.
Shiva supposedly created out of chaos, which is also taught in
Freemasonry
science.
Order out of chaos.
Big bang, explosion.
Do you know why they have put this image at the gate of CERN?
CERN, and also a G20 a couple of weeks ago.
Are they all into this? I mean, that's the God they're really serving, or what would be the whole reason for that?
The whole reason is to, of course, uplift Hinduism, and they believe that it is very closely connected to science, Hindu teachings.
Why is this statue of Shiva at CERN? The connection between ancient mythology and cutting-edge science is fascinating. CERN, home to the Large Hadron Collider, is a hub for exploring the mysteries of the universe. But what does this have to do with a Hindu deity? And here's the mind-blowing twist, wrote The Tao of Physics, linking Eastern mysticism with modern physics. At CERN, scientists study particles colliding at high speeds, reflects the ongoing cycle of creation and destruction. So why would a particle physics lab choose this ancient symbol? Shiva, in his Nataraja form, performs the cosmic dance of creation and destruction, and it perfectly embodies the dance of subatomic particles. This dance symbolizes the dynamic nature of the universe. This statue isn't just symbolic, it's a declaration that the quest to understand the universe is both a scientific journey and a spiritual one.
Jamaican Rastafarians are part of the Israelites scattered to the Americas. After transatlantic slavery sales were outlawed in the Caribbean, the colonizers chose to import Hindu Indian workers to compensate for the loss of labor force.
The influence of Hindus in Rastafari culture often gets ignored. How did Hindus influence the Rastafari movement? Slavery was finally abolished, but plantation owners still needed cheap labor. So what was the answer? Indentured laborers. Between 1845 and 1929, almost 37,000 Indians arrived in Jamaica. Hindus did have an influence on their Jamaican brethren.
And many of the traditions are Indian traditions that was adopted, brought over into Rastafari. Early Rastafari days, they have been modified to now.
Many of these Indian workers were Hindu priests called sadhus or yogis. These Hindu yogis taught the black Jamaicans many Hindu traditions, including the combining of marijuana and meditation to communicate with the spirits, which they called a spiritual enlightenment.
Sadhus are Hindu holy men. The sadhu lifestyle is a rejection of mainstream society, choosing to focus on spiritual practices instead. Rastafarians are similar to sadhus in that they reject mainstream society. Sadhus are also known for growing out their hair to form a jata, which means matted hair. And who is the most famous Hindu deity with a jata? Lord Shiva.
This is my identity, man. Yeah, this is my identity.
The pagan deity Kali, which is, of course, the wife of Shiva, known in biblical times as Baal and Ashtoreth, was also reintroduced to the Jamaicans. These actions only opened doorways to demonic attacks. Many characteristics of Rastafarianism is taken directly from Hinduism. Even the name ganja, used by Rastas, is another Hindu word for marijuana.
The connection between Rastafari and Hinduism is most evident in the Rastafarian use of ganja or cannabis as a sacred herb. Rastas believe that ganja helps them to achieve a deeper understanding of themselves and their connection to the divine. This tradition can be traced back to the Hindu indentured laborers who brought the seeds of the marijuana plant with them and used ganja in religious ceremonies such as Kali Puja and other social gatherings. One important ritual was Kali Puja. This ceremony involved sacrificing a goat as an offering to Kali.
So many of the things, like smoking of ganja, because the goddess Kali, that's where the Kali came from, you know. But the goddess Kali from India is a herb smoking person.
The belief in reincarnation in the Rastafarian religion is also taken directly from Hinduism. In Rastafarianism, reincarnation is called I and I. The Hindu philosophy of I and I in Rastafarianism encourages the belief that a person can become their own God through reincarnation and will never experience death, living forever. This belief of never experiencing death certainly sounds like the lie that Satan told Eve. Genesis 3 and 4 states, "And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die." Sounds like reincarnation. Verse 5, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil, becoming your own God. That is this Hindu philosophy in Rastafarianism. Considering the scripture that there is nothing new under the sun, Ecclesiastes 1:9, the thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. One can see that just as the unclean cannabis was used to speak to the dead during biblical Baal worship, that the marijuana in modern belief is still used to communicate to the spirits of persons that have reincarnated into an apple or coyote or another person. Nothing new under the sun. The unclean cannabis death cult maintains the same practices, mind-altering potions for necromancy. One of the most famous ganja-smoking, reincarnation-believing Rastafarians was Bob Marley. Bob Marley was well known for the Redemption Song, which rightly connected the transatlantic slave trade with the Hebrew Israelites. But after this, he and his Rastafarian religion went greatly off course. Bob Marley's largest promotion of Hindu/Rasta reincarnation doctrine is found in his song called Reincarnated Souls, which was written and sang by Bob Marley and the Wailers. This song's lyrics spoke of them praying to die before a new birth and changing form to another form. Many other mainstream modern black performers have also grabbed hold to this Eastern ideology of marijuana and reincarnation. The rapper Snoop Dogg, well known for his marijuana preferences, released an album entitled Reincarnated. The 2025 Super Bowl halftime performer Kendrick Lamar has also released songs promoting both marijuana and reincarnation. His song The Recipe promoted marijuana, and his most recent song, entitled Reincarnated, is an actual ode to reincarnation. Some of his lyrics state, reincarnated on this earth for 100+ years, body after body, lesson after lesson. Lauryn Hill and her son also have been performing and promoting these same beliefs. She uses the New Age term for reincarnation, which is Christ consciousness.
Hey son, I need you to talk to them about black Christ consciousness right now.
She said, "Hey son, I need you to talk about black Christ consciousness."
Different name, same meaning. Being reincarnated to become a god, just like Satan told Eve. Satan said, don't die, become a god. Genesis 3:4. And the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. You shall be as gods. Don't die, become a god. Many Rastafarians believe that burning the ganja or unclean cannabis is an incense and offering to the Most High God Yah. This is scripturally highly untrue. Only sweet incense was offered to Yah by the Levites. Marijuana is the total opposite of having a sweet odor. Exodus 30:7. And Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning when he dresseth the lamps. He shall burn incense upon it. 2 Chronicles 2:4. Behold, I will build an house to the name of Yah my Elohim, and dedicate it to him, and to burn before him sweet incense. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. Marijuana is well known for its stinky, skunk-like odor. It has even been called skunkweed or gas because of its strong, pungent odor that emits either when fresh or when burned. Exodus 31:11. And the anointed oil, sweet incense for the holy place, according to all that I have commanded thee to do, that they shall do. Even our Messiah Yeshua offered himself to our Father Yah for a sweet-smelling savor for us. Ephesians 5:2. And walk in love, as the Messiah also hath loved us, and hath given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to Elohim for a sweet-smelling savor. Stinky or skunky-smelling marijuana is not and was not fit as a burnt offering to Yah. Exodus 30:9. You shall offer no strange incense. Today, it is our prayers that are the incense presented before Yah. Psalms 141:1. Yah, I cry unto thee. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as evening sacrifice. Part 4. Clean cannabis is accessible and grows in many parts of the U.S. and the world. So we've deeply delved into the unclean form of cannabis. Now let's discuss the clean type of cannabis. Clean cannabis has no connection to the mind-altering death cult of Baal, and its seeds are not perverted. Clean cannabis seeds are not formed from chemically forcing a female plant to create a male seed and impregnate another female plant. Also, the male plant of the clean cannabis is not destroyed in order to force the female plant to becoming seedless. Clean cannabis plants grow naturally, produce much seed, according to Yah's design. Ditchweed, or feral hemp, is the actual natural form of the Yah-given cannabis plant. It grows independently, naturally pollinating, creating seeds, and flourishing. It is a wild weed, freely growing, and can be found abundantly in the Midwestern U.S. states, on the sides of the roads, and in fields. These plants are remnants of a 20th century government push for farmers to produce hemp cloth for war purposes. Once the need for the plants was complete, the plants were abandoned, but they continued growth naturally as feral hemp or ditchweed. While feral hemp is totally different from the industrially cultivated hemp grown for CBD medicinal oils, the industrial hemp is just as perverted as the cannabis grown for marijuana. The industrial hemp growing process also destroys the male plant and utilizes feminized seeds to produce only female plants once again.
This is typical of this area of eastern Nebraska. It doesn't have trouble going feral. In other words, the domesticated crop became a hedgerow weed. Hemp is your premier bird seed. The birds love it, and these plants are doing a very nice job of producing hemp. So every year their seed falls to the ground, and the next year you have a new crop.
So we were driving down the road, we saw these plants, and we stopped to look at them, and you see they got little bitty bulbs on them, and stopped to look at the leaves. Some marijuana going right on the side of the road.
The natural process of cannabis plants growing in the wild without intervention by mankind produces plants without intoxicating and psychoactive properties. These natural cannabis plants are high in medicinal CBD oils and nutrients, as well as being an edible nutritional protein source. And again, they do not produce any significant hallucinogenic THC. As a matter of fact, PubMed, a government-backed health publication, expressed that the CBD found in wild feral hemp was up to 8 times higher in medicinal, healthy CBD content than the industrial hemp, and the feral hemp was also much higher in the health-benefiting antimicrobial properties over the industrial hemp. Left alone in the fields, both the perverted marijuana and the industrial hemp can return naturally over time back to healthy CBD-producing plant without intoxicating THC. So, only with man's manipulation of Yah's plant does it turn from healthy to harmful. These methods were taught thousands of years ago to ancient pagan worshippers and brought forward through the millennia. We truly praise Yah for his guidance in opening our eyes to actions that are not allowable by biblical law, and indeed break Yah's law. We strive to be humble and obedient servants of the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Praise Yah. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Elohim is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. 1 Samuel 12:10. And they cried unto Yah and said, we have sinned because we have forsaken Yah and have served Baalim and Ashtaroth. But now deliver us out of the hand of our enemies, and we will serve thee. Hallelujah.